Well, hi everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Chaffee on this Thursday, November the 8th, 2018. Moving right along, the clock is ticking as we get closer and closer to Thanksgiving and to Christmas and all the fun stuff in between. I've always had this idea, by the way, that from Halloween to Christmas Day, that entire time period is basically just one long day, and then it really accelerates as we get past Thanksgiving. The last 3 months of the year just go by so fast. First of all, I just want to say last night I had a great time at the Bayonne Library, but we did have some wireless issues and the live stream did cut out, I noticed, about halfway through, and I apologize for that. That's always a risk when I do these live streams from the libraries, because in some places the signals are good, in some places they have issues, and in some places it's just they're good, but when you happen to be there, there's a problem. So it's kind of a risk. I roll the dice and hope to get the best signal that I can, and when I do, you get to see the whole thing. So we'll try for the next one, which is going to be in December the 12th, and that will be at the Babylon Library in Babylon. Also, just want to let everybody know, for those of you who are on the Patreon platform but might have missed the post this morning, if you're on the Patreon platform and you are on an Android, okay, check your posts, because my new app is out, and I'm beta testing it, and you Patreon members are getting it first. So for those of you who are interested in joining the Patreon network, this is a pretty good time to do it. You get to beta test the new app, and hopefully the Apple version of the app will be out very, very shortly. It's a subscription site. It's just $2 a month, and there are some higher tiers in case you are feeling a bit more generous. I'm putting the link here on the chat board for those of you who are interested. And by the way, it's not just the app, but you get a lot of extra ad-free weather posts that I write throughout the day, and also we are doing live streams for Patreon members only, and we usually do that during the morning. Was a little bit off this week because of my situation yesterday with the library trip, but we will live stream tomorrow morning. Anthony Orr is on tonight, our resident statistician. Is always good to see you, and he's going to be basically the sergeant at arms, and make sure everybody behaves themselves, which is a good thing. David Schwartz is with respect to the app. Okay, if you let me look at that again. This is why we're beta testing it, because we're trying to make to get all the kinks out. So I'll check on it a little bit later on. Okay, and what else is there I wanted to tell you ahead of time? Darn it, I don't think I have anything else to tell you from that respect, so we can get to the weather. The Babylon Talk Box 505 is on this Wednesday, December 12th at 7 p.m. So you got a lot of time, and we will, of course, talk more about that as we get closer. 5,000 subscribers with no videos, pointing out that it is snowing right now in parts of Kansas, Missouri, and indeed it is. And we're going to be going right to that with our current watches and warnings map from the National Weather Service. And actually, we've got an area of winter weather advisories up for parts of central and eastern Kansas, and for also western Missouri. There's a large area from the southern plains running eastward through the Tennessee Valley, where we're dealing with either freeze watches and warnings, or also frost warnings that are up because of the cold air that's coming down. This cold push, the initial push of it, is more south than it is to the east. We have a small area of winter storm warnings up for parts of the western part of the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and winter weather advisories that are on the western side the western half of the state of Michigan. Now, in the northeast, from central New Jersey, or basically from Route 195 in New Jersey, central New Jersey, northeastward through southern and southeastern New England, flash flood watches are up here. And that is for the rain that is coming for tomorrow. We got this fast-moving system that is heading into the east. Some red flag warnings up in the west, and some patchy areas with wind advisories and high wind watches and warnings. But as far as any kind of precipitation going on, it's actually pretty quiet in the western part of the United States. Now we'll go to the surface map so we can take a look at what's happening right now. And here we go. Bring it up front and center, and I've got the radar overlaid here. We're looking at the geography of Kansas, Nebraska into Missouri, and you can see pretty well. Let me see if I can darken these state boundary lines a little bit. That'll just take me a moment. And okay, just give me a second. I'm gonna see if I can. Okay, we'll take that out. Yeah, okay, so now we got the state lines. I think you can see the state lines a bit better, and I think we're all set. So let me take the tide gauges off. We don't need those. Okay, so here we are. This is the surface map where it is snowing tonight. You can see that the temperatures are hovering around the 30-degree mark in a good chunk of northeastern Kansas and on over into northern Missouri. This is pretty cold air for this time of year that has come down. And not all of this snow that you see on the radar is actually reaching the ground. Certainly where you see the greener shades, the greener colors, yes, there we have snow coming down in and around Kansas City and places out just west of there. And St. Louis right now is in the middle and upper 30s. It's a little on the warm side, but to the north and west of there, it is cold enough for snow. And I think you probably may see the first flakes of snow in St. Louis, and this is all also heading for Chicagoland, where temperatures are in the mid to upper 30s. A little bit of warmer air coming in off the lake, so you got the upper 30s there, but then once you get away from the lakeshore, you've got temperatures that are down more in the middle 30s, and further north up into Wisconsin and into Minnesota, where temperatures are in the middle 20s. You've got some snow at least aloft showing up there in the bluish shadings that you see here on the radar, and also starting to see some precip aloft in parts of Wisconsin. The radar, this is just showing you where the precipitation and the intensity of the precipitation. So wherever you see the green, you certainly do have the snow hard. Well, let me start that again. That it's snowing hard enough to reach the ground. The southern area of that is mostly rain, and then that extends further south with some showery rains and even a few thunderstorms across parts of northeast Texas. We're getting some downpours and a few scattered thunderstorms in the southeast and up into northeastern Florida. Up the east coast, some stray activity into the Carolinas, but a lot of this is going to fade out during the night until that energy to the west comes in. And what you're seeing over New Jersey, southeastern Pennsylvania into Delaware, those are all false returns. There's nothing going on there, nor is there anything going on across much of the northeast. And in fact, when we look at the satellite loop tonight, there's actually been a sliver, if you want to call it a sliver, of dry, clear skies as we sat in between some high clouds out to the east and some cloud cover out to the west with the next storm system. You can see the large concentration of moisture that runs from Texas northeast up toward the Great Lakes, and of course all those clouds going in a northeasterly direction, so we know where this is all going to wind up in the last analysis. So we'll bring this up again. Here we go. And I had an extra radar up, and here's in terms of snow amounts. Now I'm taking this off of the digital, the National Weather Service's digital forecast with the graphical forecast that you can get if you go to weather.gov, and you can actually just kind of build your own parameter pick your parameter, pick your geography, and build a map. But you can see it from the forecast. I actually moved the date time here. I'll take it out all the way to the end so we can see what's going on elsewhere in the Northeast. So this would be total snowfall through Sunday. But obviously what we're seeing in this area is all for tonight. And it's mostly 1 to 2 inch snowfalls, a couple of 3-inch amounts showing up north and west of St. Louis and into northeastern Missouri, southwestern parts of well, let's call that western Illinois, extreme western Illinois, with some 2 and 3 inch amounts there, some 1 to 2 inch amounts in and around Chicago and Milwaukee. But where you have those winter weather advisories in the western half of Michigan, here we're talking about 3 to 6 inch snowfalls, and right on the lakeshore, I'm not sure what city that's supposed to be, but that's there's an 8-inch number there. And then you go on the UP, the Upper Peninsula, and you start to see some pockets of 9, 10, and even some 10 to 15-inch amounts in the western part of the Upper Peninsula. So this is where we have the winter storm warnings. And of course, in Wisconsin, as you get into northern Wisconsin, we're talking about 2, 3, and 4-inch amounts. Now, in the Northeast, with respect to the system that is coming up for tomorrow, for Friday into Friday night, it is most of this is going to be elevation driven, particularly where you see these pockets of higher amounts, like that 13-inch amount that you see up in the Adirondacks. That is obviously that some of this snow is going to be elevation driven because we don't have really cold air. We have chilly air. We have, I guess you want to call it colder air, certainly when you go up into upstate New York, but it's reflecting the calendar, which is right now November the 8th. So this is the reason why you see that the amounts are kind of spotty like this. So elevation driven. And then as you get into parts of Vermont, New Hampshire, again, elevation driven amounts there with that 8-inch number north of Montpelier, but you see a lot of spots with lower elevation where you don't see very much. Same goes for northeastern New Hampshire. And then, of course, you go across Maine, cut Maine on a diagonal in the middle, those areas up to the north and west forecast to get anywhere from 4 to maybe as much as 8 inches of snow. Now, again, this is for this first weather system. We haven't yet even touched upon the system for next week, which I think still remains in a bit of flux. Now, the issue for the Northeast is going to be for the coastal areas of the Northeast, New Jersey to southeastern New England. We have the flash flood watch that is up. And of course, with these weather events that keep coming every 2 to 3 days, the ground is pretty soft. Here's the surface map. And of course, you've got this energy that is coming out of the Central Plains states that starts to rev up during the overnight and tomorrow morning. So you have this expanding area of snow in northern Illinois, northwestern Indiana, into western Michigan. Chicago's in it, Milwaukee's in it. Again, much of this is on the light side. You've got this cold high that's coming down. I mean, this is a really strong shot of cold air that is moving into the plains and the upper Midwest. But the push, the main push from this is more west than it is and south than it is to the east. Eventually, some of that colder air will come to the east behind this system, but we're going to have to wait till this low goes by and it'll kick in on Saturday with the strong northwest wind. So you've got the high to the north that's trying to hold, but we don't have any blocking, so it really can't, and it gets out of the way. A primary low that pops up tomorrow morning somewhere, say in eastern Kentucky, that runs up into northeastern Ohio. There's weakness in the pressure field. There's a secondary low that's going to probably develop. There's a bit of a warm front here that is from the surface low southeastward to southeastern Virginia, and then kind of curls out off the North Carolina coast. That high is pressing down, so you're getting a bit of, you're getting an onshore flow, and that secondary low, which the model was picking up a bit better the last couple of runs. It's kind of taking a little longer for it to make a full appearance, but where you see this heavy rain here is probably at the point, where the new surface low is. And by tomorrow night at 2 a.m., that low is sitting somewhere in southeastern Massachusetts with heavy rains that would have moved through the flash flood watch area and in the process of moving through the flash flood watch area in southeastern New England. Now that low goes out Saturday morning. You'll notice the very tight pressure gradient that's developing between the intensifying low to the northeast and high pressure in Missouri. The rain winds up going into Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and on northeast from there. So there will be some heavy rains in Nova Scotia late Friday, early Saturday morning and into Saturday afternoon, ending by evening. And then that low pulls away to the northeast. Could even see maybe a brief change to flurries across and snow showers in New Brunswick as the low center goes by. But it's the gradient, again, remains pretty tight. So look for it to be fairly windy in New England, down into maybe down to about southernmost New Jersey. The winds will start to drop off from there as you go south and west toward the high, and then it pulls out to the northeast. We'll have a cold day Saturday and an even colder day on Sunday. I'm looking for temperatures in my area probably not to get much out of the low to mid 40s. Then the high, some of that high moves out. You get a little bit of a high that kind of hangs back into eastern New England, but you're going to start to get this next round of energy coming out of the Gulf states, another low that comes out of the Gulf states and starts to run up the eastern seaboard for Tuesday. So by Tuesday morning, you've got rain pretty much everywhere from Massachusetts down into Virginia, North Carolina, with some heavy rain and thunderstorms as that low intensifies. And to the north and west, where you've got this next cold air mass, the shot of the next cold air mass coming in, starting to filter in, and a little bit of cold air that's left from the weekend in parts of upstate New York and New England. You're going to see the precip begin to some snow and sleet there, but there will be snow on the backside. The problem here is it's all fine and dandy if the GFS is correct, but there's some pretty big model differences with regards to Tuesday's event between the GFS and the European, and I'll get to that in a second. So if we follow the GFS's kind of neat scenario here where we get a deepening low southeast of Long Island, moving to the northeast, heavy rains, gusty winds on the coast, changing over to snow as you go up, say, in through the middle and upper Hudson Valley, on up through the west side of the Catskills, and westward from there into western New York. A little bit of lake effect starting to kick in, down through Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And by the way, in the period before that, we do have this sort of narrow sliver of snow that's down into northern Mississippi. I'm not sure how real that is, but we'll watch it on subsequent runs. And then as that low really intensifies as it gets into the Gulf of Maine, this is where we get that cold air to come in Tuesday night and on Wednesday. So we'll be down probably in the 20s on Wednesday morning in a lot of areas, and again Thursday morning, 20s to low 30s. Highs on Wednesday during the day, probably not much above the low 40s, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do see, my area sees some scattered snow shower activity as the upper trough goes by. And the core of that cold air comes in Wednesday afternoon into Wednesday night, and then we start to see it moderate slowly. And by the way, that cold shot is going to make it pretty far down to the south. You can see that high drops down into Kentucky. You've got northeast winds all the way down into southern Florida. So this is going to be a fairly solid push of cold air that comes into the United States. I'll bring the temperature map up. We'll show it pretty well. Now, these are the 7 p.m. temperatures on Wednesday evening, but I'll just back it up as we go through Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. So by Wednesday morning, you've got pretty much everybody up and down the East Coast, down into the Carolinas below freezing, and the freezing line actually makes it all the way down into the Florida Panhandle and down to the Gulf Coast. You've got the way the trough sets up in the upper atmosphere. You see how the cold air lines up at the surface, and of course the coldest air as you go further north into the Ohio Valley, on up through the Great Lakes, and in through pockets of the Northeast. You got numbers down in the single digits there Wednesday morning up in upstate New York, if this verifies, and the daytime highs go nowhere. And here's Thursday morning, not quite as cold in the first areas furthest to the south, but still pretty cold across much of the interior mid-Atlantic and on up through the Northeast. So this is Thursday morning with regards to the overnight lows. So this is a fairly strong shot of cold air that we're talking about, that is coming down. And let's illustrate now what the model dilemma here is, because it's actually a very interesting one that has shown up. It seems as if when we look at the upper air, and by the way, this is probably a very good time for me to just acknowledge these wonderful maps are courtesy of tropicaltidbits.com, which for you weather folks should be your go-to website. Okay, so I'm going to start with, just to match it up apples to apples. So we're going to look at the trough on the GFS for Tuesday morning. What I want you to pay attention to is the wavelength of the trough and the overall axis of the trough. And let's I'll bring the paint box up so I can do a little drawing. Okay, where are you? Hold on a second here. Why is it not showing up? Ah, there you go. There we go. Okay, sometimes I got to do things a couple of times to get it to work. Okay, so here's your upper air. Again, this is for Tuesday morning. Now here's the axis of your trough, and running from, make sure I got the right brush size, which I do. So the trough has actually got a bit of a northeast, southwest tilt to it. So it's what we call a positively tilted trough. It's a strong trough, but it's moving. You know, it's progressive, so it's moving along. And by the way, it's not neutral or negative. If you remember last week, you know, we had earlier this week, rather, we've had a number of runs that were trying to show the trough axis more along the lines of neutral, which would be north-south, or negative, which would be northwest to southeast. We're not seeing that here on the latest runs. We seem to be settling into this idea that this is going to be a bit more progressive. Now, the GFS is this is very powerful here. There's a vortex that is just north of Lake Superior. The northern part of this jet stream is very strong, and the GFS suggests that this is going to carry the whole trough, pretty much the whole trough, toward the coastline. The European, on the other hand, is a little different. The European, on its upper air, where is it? Okay, it's being evil on me, so hang on. Okay, try it that way. There we go. So here's the European's view of all of this. And the European's different. There's no upper low sitting over Lake Superior, as you can see. It is actually much further to the north. It's off the top of the chart here, where the position of that vortex is. It does show the northern part of that trough extending southward to about here, but then you've got the southern part of the trough, and it appears, when you look at this, that this is actually beginning to separate from that northern stream. That is going to be critical in terms of what happens on Tuesday, what kind of a surface low comes out, and what the ultimate outcome is with regards to snow in the interior Northeast. The GF will go out now. We're going to have to jump 24 hours, and you'll see the difference in 24 hours. The European, by Wednesday morning, and of course at this point everything is all done, but the big difference here is if you look at what happens in the southern stream, the European leaves a very substantial trough here behind in the southern branch, and the northern branch comes through, but it's pretty much a separate entity here. It does bring down cold air, but by leaving all that southern energy behind, it really kind of changes the magnitude of whatever system we're going to be dealing with in the east. The GFS, on the other hand, says no. The GFS is different. It takes most of the southern energy out with that northern stream. And you see it here. this is a very, very impressive vortex that goes into eastern Canada, and that's a pretty deep trough that is going to be moving through. The southern end of that trough is just this little weak piece that it leaves down along the western Gulf Coast. So this is a very critical difference in terms of what it does on the surface. So just to remind you with what it does at the surface. So if you've got the GFS right, that would imply that there would be a bit more of a significant snow event for the areas well north and west of the coast. So we're talking interior parts, central and western PA, elevation driven, upstate New York, elevation driven, and up into interior northern New England. The European, and I think I'm going to have a little bit of a tough time here, so just bear with me. Oh, this would help too. Let me get rid of this. I got to always remember to change the map. Okay, so here you have, this is your GFS. And again, with that trough, the way the GFS has it for Wednesday, it makes sense that you have a fairly robust surface low that comes out, runs northeastward, up the coast, close to the coast, but up the coast, and produces some significant elevation-driven snows on the western flank. The European, which we can only see in those 24-hour increments, and I'll bring it up tighter, is right there. Okay, so make sure I change the correct model. Okay, so there are big differences here. Here's the European for Tuesday morning, a weak surface low in eastern Tennessee. Okay, the GFS for the same time frame, a much stronger low in southeastern Virginia. Okay, that's a big difference. You're talking about 77 west to 82 west. That's almost 250, 300 miles further west on the European, and a much weaker low. The European would drive a weaker low initially up the Appalachians, right, basically, or up through central Pennsylvania into upstate New York, and then intensifies it into southeastern Canada. So here's your Tuesday morning on the European. Wednesday morning, the low is already east of New Brunswick and moving away. The GFS has it pretty much in the same spot. They both get to the same spot, but they do it differently as it moves up the coast. So again, this is critical. This is going to be critical and important in terms of whatever snow we wind up getting out of this. And when we look at, this is total snowfall by the GFS model. So you know what? I'm going to break this down a bit. We'll go to we'll go to the 24-hour snowfall so we can kind of separate out the two events. So here's your snow from the first event. Back it up. So this is tonight across the Central Plains to the Midwest, and I'm not sure what this is back up through PA, but then obviously it's doing something with this during tomorrow morning as the precip. Actually, there is going to be some snow in northern Pennsylvania and into western New York tomorrow morning as that lead precip arrives. A number of models show that. And then we've got the snow amounts increasing through upstate New York. We'll take it out again to Saturday morning, and there you have the snow amounts as we move through upstate New York and on up into northern New England, where we've got some substantial 6-inch plus amounts showing up there. The lake effect, of course, will be underway, so there'll be some lake effect going on during Saturday along the lee shores of Ontario and north central New York, and also in southwestern New York. Then, of course, here comes the second system, and again, this is predicated on the GFS's idea of a low deeper and further east. Or do we have what the European is doing, where it leaves a lot of that southern energy behind? I'm tending to lean to the idea of the GFS because of everything that I'm seeing upstream. It would seem to me that the northern part of the jet stream is going to wind up being more important. It's kind of odd that we've gotten to this, because back a few days ago, it was the European that was trying to overdo the cold air, and it was the GFS that was trying to leave that trough behind in the southwest, and now the two models have essentially flipped positions as far as what the outcome is going to be. It's funny how that happens sometimes. I think you sometimes think it's deliberately designed to confuse and keep forecasters on their toes. The rainfall. Let's look at the two rain events that are happening out of all of this. So for tomorrow, where we have those flash flood watches up, we've got the GFS generating some 2-inch plus rains in a pretty narrow sliver from northern New Jersey throughout southern New England. So the GFS rainfall profile kind of matches up with where the Weather Service put up its flash flood watches up. And also you can see the melted liquids going back down into eastern Kentucky and on up through much of the Northeast. This system now will get the next one, and you can see what happens across the Gulf states and off the Southeast. So this is for Tuesday, and you're seeing right now the models generating anywhere between 1 inch and 1.5 inches, which I think is pretty fair, and some heavier amounts as you go down into southeastern Virginia and into North Carolina, which would make sense because of where the surface low is going to be, and the warm sector, the warm front, cold front, and the thunderstorms that'll probably be developing in that warm sector along the Carolina coast and points eastward. So it's a very interesting scenario that we have painted here on the models with regards to the next two weather systems. So we're going to pay close attention. Of course, going to be curious. The first of the season in terms of trying to predict snow. The first widespread snowfall of the season always seems to be the one that is the toughest for forecasters to handle. And by the way, on the long range, really quick, once that trough pulls out, we've got another short wave that comes in behind it for Friday. And also the fact that the European, when it leaves that southern feature behind, it kicks it out and tries to bring a storm up the coast at the end of next week, a rainstorm up the coast at the end of next week. So I don't know. I kind of find that a little bit far-fetched with the leaving behind of the southern part of the trough, which I say cautiously only because I know the models are listening and they're designed to embarrass me, so that tonight's model runs, the GFS will suddenly start leaving that trough behind. But once whatever is around at the end of next week, we do see a bit of a pattern shift happening and a bit of a warmer trend for Thanksgiving week, with a ridge building in the east and the trough dropping down into the west. Whether that's a temporary phenomena or not, I don't know. I tend to think it probably is. I think it's a little too early for us to be locking in to any pattern. And plus the pattern that we've been in, this kind of fast pattern with weather systems coming every couple of days, has been going on for several weeks now. And I think it's probably a good time for it to take a bit of a pause, as we say. Okay, SPC, WPC, the Weather Prediction Center, as far as its 7-day rainfall amounts are concerned, you can see it's pretty substantial across much of the eastern part of the United States, especially east of the Appalachians and in New England, where we've got amounts of 3, 4, 5 inches or more being shown in some places, and also in parts of the Gulf states and on up into the southern Appalachians. Much drier in the western half of the United States, with the exception being up in the northwest corner of the Pacific Northwest. So that is at least WPC's view on all of this. So time for me to come back up to talk to you guys. So I think we've done, that was a pretty extensive little synopsis here that we've just done. Julie Ann Steele, the snow will come when it comes. We will all be crying in the North Atlantic. Correct, but you're going to get some rain up your way come Friday night and for Saturday up in southeastern in your part of southeastern Canada and Nova Scotia, with snows as you go further up north and west. Andrew Del Virginia, the European model had that low forming. Yes, having it coming up Friday. Again, that is right now, that is because it leaves the bottom part of that trough behind. I don't know whether I have any confidence in what the European is doing. As I said, earlier, the flipping of the model's positions on this is comical, where the GFS was doing this a couple of days ago and the European was amplified to no end in the east, and now the models have each taken the opposite role. But I'm going to lean toward the GFS. It seems to me lately that the GFS is doing a slightly better job. I think it's been kind of swinging back and forth between the two models, but in the last few days, it seems like the GFS has taken a bit of an upper hand on this. So I'm gonna cautiously lean in that direction. Israel, you like when I draw on those maps? Yeah, it's good. These upper air maps can kind of lose meaning by just putting on there. So at least when I put on, I draw where the troughs are and draw the arrows of the flow. So this way you guys can get a good sense of how the jet stream is working. Monet Hebert, you want to see if snow in Atlanta? Well, look, if you wind up with these amplified troughs in the east like this, when we get deeper into December and January, you may very well. And I know that a coating to an inch of snow could shut down Atlanta very, very quickly. Johnny Quest, Virga, the precip aloft, not reaching the ground. Virga, that's exactly correct. I'm just running back on all the chat. Nice to see a number of you that haven't been on in a while popping on, and of course the regulars, William Huber, we've got Chris Alley on, Greenfire 919. Funny thing you mentioned about the watches with the Weather Service, and I'm not, it's just kind of odd. This is probably of the last 4 times that we've had the last 3 rain events here that have caused flooding. When we had the flash flood watches up, we didn't get the flooding. When they didn't have the flash flood watches up, we did get the flooding. So this time around, we've got the flash flood watches up. The question is, are we going to get the flooding? So let's see how that plays. Let's see. Got the leaves up today. They will probably be back tomorrow. I did notice. I did notice that there's a lot of leaves down in my backyard, and I've got a lot of work to do. I usually wind up bagging about 150 of them by the time we're done. 150 bags, that is. I wish it was just 150 leaves. Brian Ford, check out the temperatures up in parts of the Dakotas. It is going to be pretty cold. So, in fact, I'm looking at it now. Just want to give you a quick, show you how cold it actually is up there at the moment. Whoops. Sorry. Where is it? There we go. That wasn't supposed to happen. But here's a look at the current temperatures across the Dakotas, where we've got single digits and low teens. The whole state is freezing right now, and that cold air actually even moves down into South Dakota to some degree. Maybe get that a little wider. Then you start to get into the teens and mid-20s, and then of course, you get further south, you get closer to that frontal boundary, and you start to deal with all the snow that's on there. So yeah, indeed, Ryan Ford is quite cold in Dakota land, which is I have not been there. I've been to about all the states of the United States. I have been to, I think I counted 27 of them, so I got 23 to go. Done Hawaii, haven't done Alaska. But I've gotten through, I've been in almost every state east of the Mississippi, okay, and a couple of states west of the Mississippi. But I got a lot, I still got a ways to go. My goal was always in my life to make sure I set foot in every state of the United States at least once. And hopefully I got plenty of time left to do that. Ethan Bean, can I explain how density, air pressure, and air temperature all relate and are connected along with altitude? Well, I mean, as you go in altitude, temperatures diminish usually, unless you have an inversion, which is when you usually you wind up with fog. In other words, temperatures fall with height. If they're falling rapidly with height, you have a pretty unstable atmosphere. If they're rising with height, you have a pretty stable atmosphere, and you have an inversion. of the norm. Okay, because normally it's supposed to go down 5 degrees every 1,000 feet, 5 degrees Fahrenheit every 1,000 feet. As you go up in height, that is the lapse rate, and then you'll see various times when you have a very unstable atmosphere, the lapse rate will be faster, or perhaps it would be a bit less. The pressures, of course, with pressure, you see that pressure as you go up in height also diminish, and the density of the air is less. I'm trying to understand where you want to go with this with regards to making the connection, because at least in terms of the temperatures with height, as they decrease with height, would define the relative stability or instability of the atmosphere. When am I coming to Lakewood? They got to get in touch with me. I did hear from them, and they said they would get back to me. So when they do, I'll let you know, and I'll let everybody know. Scott Briller, Central Park's average first inch of snow is December 14th. So you still got another month and 6 days before you get to the average first snowfall date. Okay? William Huber taking the temperature in Siberia down to -35. The snow cover in Siberia is extensive now. In fact, since from the last week of October, the snowfall there has absolutely accelerated, and it has, in terms of the rate of snowfall growth, it kind of finished in the middle of the pack for that October indicator month. So I don't know if that's any kind of signal one way or the other. But it's something that I guess we'll have to we always wind up looking back in hindsight to really understand what it means as far as the longer range. I'm sure we're going to need many more years of looking at this, but I'm not the expert in that. That's Dr. Judah Cohen's field, and if you want to follow he tweets about this stuff every day, so you should follow him on Twitter for more. I'm still unsure whether I saw a rain-trapped tornado in Kansas or if it was a downburst. When was this, Israel? When was this? It's snowing through much of central and northeastern Kansas right now. Is that cold air in the Dakotas related to the cold air for us next week? It's part of the same, the jet stream is bringing down these shots of cold air. It's not going to be the same high that comes. It's going to be another high that's coming down. So it'll be the shot behind this one that comes in for our area in the east for the middle part of next week. That high, the coldest air is going to go more south, but some of that cold air is going to bleed to the east, and that is going to be coming in here for Saturday, Sunday, into Monday. And Johnny Quest needs a pumper truck from the fire department. You got that right. At least weather systems right now continue to move very quickly in this sort of fast flow that we have, and there's no blocking in the atmosphere. So at least from the standpoint of having it rain someplace for several days or more at a time, that is not going to happen in this pattern that we're in. All right, folks, going to call it a night at this point. Thanks very much for being here on this Thursday. It's almost the weekend. So let me just once again, for those of you that are on the Patreon platform, if you have an Android mobile device, you can check out the new app, okay, and help me by beta testing it for me. And if you'd like to join the Patreon platform, where we're doing all kinds of things all day long, weather-wise, including additional detailed posts that you can get with no ads, and you can also message me at any time with a timely response promised. And tomorrow morning, resuming live videos, exclusive live videos, only for Patreon members. And by the way, I've also created a library on YouTube for the Patreon videos, which are separate. So you have to, if you want to go back and look at them, there's a watch list that I've created on Patreon Just check out that post that I put up there for those of you on the platform. And here's the link to it. It's a subscription program. It's just $2 a month, and it's a great way to support my channel. Another way you can support my channel is to shop on Amazon, and to do it with the link that is on the descriptor to this live stream and the descriptor to this video, particularly with the holidays coming, with Hanukkah and Christmas and whatever else you're celebrating between now and the end of the year. So here's the Amazon link for you. So if you shop on Amazon, it doesn't cost you an extra dime. Amazon throws me back a little bit of coin for driving the sale to them, and I get myself a couple of cigars out of it. We're a participant in the Amazon Services LLC Associates program, which is an affiliate advertising program designed to provide a means for us to earn fees by linking to Amazon.com and its affiliated sites. Thank you, Cullen, for being here. I appreciate it. Joe and Joe show tonight, assuming we're both up to it, and I'm feeling good. I had a cup of coffee a little while ago, so I'm in good shape. The Joe and Joe show tonight at 9:15 on Facebook. And then tomorrow morning at Patreon members, you'll be alerted to the morning exclusive live stream, probably at about 9 or 9:30 Eastern Time. And then we'll be back tomorrow night with our regular YouTube live stream. And tomorrow night we will do the Joe and Joe show as well as we go into the weekend. Thanks for being here, everybody. Have a great night, and hopefully we'll see you later.